Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. David Haye is confident he can overcome recent injuries to reverse his shock 2017 loss to Tony Bellew, and it really was a shock when the pair meet later this week. So the fight between Haye and Bellew has certainly been a long time coming. With the originally scheduled rematch, that was meant to take place all the way back in December. So this thing has been dragged out, and that was because the first rematch had to be cancelled because Haye injured himself after falling upstairs. That's right, he was falling upstairs, reached out, tore a bicep. So healthy now, we're only a few days away. And I think it's fair to say actually this matchup, it's generated far fewer headlines the second time around. And Haye, he's certainly been restraining his usual chat and bluster in this build-up. And I guess we also have to consider that another factor for fewer headlines could also be the plethora of other top boxing on recently, especially in the heavyweight division. Sometimes it's really feast or famine, and it's certainly been a feast recently. So it's kind of worked to starve this rematch of a bit of attention. And I guess as well, this is my sort of hunch too, that potentially the overall interest that was there for the first fight, it's not quite there for this one. There's certainly a high degree of interest, but nowhere near what it was for that first fight. So I'm keen to get your thoughts on that, because I do think that this has been quite a low-key affair compared to some other recent fights, and especially that first Haye-Bellew fight. But fight week it is, so we've had a press conference kicking things off in Liverpool. So I'll get to a couple of quotes and a couple of clips from the different respective sides, and then into some thoughts on what we might well expect come fight night. So Tony Bellew's trainer, Dave Caldwell, he was first up at the presser, wasting no time declaring David Haye a former shadow of himself, saying he was a fantastic former fighter that's tried to catch what he used to have. I've got the better fighter. Tony Bellew wins. And Bellew himself, he's expecting big things.
I'm going to do exactly what I've done in the first fight. You're going to miss. And you're going to miss by miles. So expect a cagey start. David will show me the respect that he should have shown in the first fight, I'm pretty sure. So you will see on May the 5th, a tentative start. David will want to play a game of chess. I know what he's going to do before he's even doing it. So he will look to come out, be tentative, use his jab, take centre stage. But ultimately, a couple of rounds go by, we start sweating, things get hot, gets hard. As soon as it starts to get hard, David will revert to type. That is his nature. Every other fighter in the world is exactly the same. When he reverts to type, he will then give me the opportunities that I need. And David Haye will get stopped on May the 5th quicker than he did on March the 4th. It's as simple as that.
David Haye, meanwhile, says he's prepared well, he's on point, and he's more than ready for Tony Bellew.
I didn't believe Tony Bellew had what it took to beat me on my worst night. I was terribly wrong. He raised his game way more than I'd ever seen in any of his prior fights, and I expect exactly the same thing again on Saturday night. I expect, even looking in his eyes, looking at his face, he looks trimmer, he looks fitter, he looks leaner. He looks more. I can feel it. I can see it. I can look in your face and see it.
I know I can see it in yours too. Fear.
Exactly. We're both going to be better versions.
Are you going to tell them all to bet on me again?
My speed, timing is back. I'm faster, sharper.
Just like last time.
It's all back.
Just like last time. You make it 2.0.
It's 10.0 this time. 10.0.
Must be 25.6.
62.9.
You made more comebacks than fucking Bruce John McLean.
I have, and this time is when it all clicks together. I'm feeling good.
And just before I get on to a couple of other things, one of the most interesting and heated moments of the press conference was when Haye's trainer Ismail Salas, he fired up, and he really did, at Tony Bellew at the suggestion David Haye is just a 4-round fighter.
I don't just think I just think that's how
yes, very good of you. Let me say what you say. You speak out now. It's my time.
Oh, sorry.
Anyway, you listen now.
has to be said, until Salas fired up, it was actually a bit of a fizzer in terms of niggle at this presser. But not for lack of trying. Tony Bellew, he was needling, he was prodding Haye right throughout. But Haye was doing his best to keep a lid on the retorts. You could see he was almost biting, but he was just really trying to stay calm, stay in control, not give in to the bait that Tony Bellew was throwing up. And that really has been something that's been a feature of this somewhat muted second build-up. So Haye, he's resisted the big talk that he did display in that first fight. You know, the I'll sort of put you in hospital talk, you won't go home to your wife and kids, all that sort of rhetoric that he was running the first time around. And to some degree, it was to be expected that the talk would be a bit dimmer this time, given it backfired so horrendously the first time around when he was injured and lost. It really humbled him, to some degree at least, and he's clearly moderating his behaviour. But I'm sure, though, the same old cocky and overconfident David Haye, it's in there somewhere. It's waiting to come out, but he's restraining it. But I have no doubt that he does believe he can win, and win well. But can he? That's the real question here. Because certainly on paper, a fit and healthy David Haye, it should be Tony Bellew all day, every day, and twice on Sundays, and then twice again on the Monday. I mean, the thing is, though, we don't really know where Haye is at. In the limited number of fights that he's had since making his comeback, you know, he's either been against tin cans or he was injured in his last proper fight. But I think it's clear, though, from what we have seen, the little footage where he's actually been in the ring, the 37-year-old is now past his prime. He's lost a step. And the first fight, it did show that despite him looking in fantastic shape, his body is betraying him. His body has always been a bit of an issue in terms of niggly injuries, but he's older now. It's not going to get any better. And let's face it, David Haye's always relied heavily on his athleticism. It's a big part of who David Haye is. So if you start taking some of that away, is what's left good enough to beat Bellew? It's a good question, because where is David Haye at? I'm sure Bellew, he's going to be coming into this fight knowing that David Haye, still on a half-decent night, is going to be trouble. A real danger in there, because he doesn't want to get caught flush with too many right hands. I'm sure he's going to be coming in, fighting cautiously in the main. He'll be letting Haye be the aggressor. He'll be trying to make a miss. He'll be trying to counter, score points. I'm sure he'll be trying to be defensively responsible. And he will try to drag David Haye into deeper waters. I mean, he said David Haye's a 4-round fighter, so of course he's going to have a better shot if he can get Haye into the later rounds, survive a potential early onslaught if one comes. But in saying all this, I'm sure David Haye anticipates this. I'm sure he knows that Tony Bellew is going to fight a certain way. So I am interested to see how does David Haye handle it, because arguably he does look at his best when the other guy is coming forward and Haye is sort of sniping in and out, using that athleticism and putting his right hand to use. And given that embarrassing loss in 2017, Bellew, he's probably right that David Haye's probably going to start off in a measured way. He'll work his way into the fight. But is that the best fight for David Haye? I guess that depends where David Haye is at, because some of this is a bit of an unknown to us here, because we haven't really seen enough of him to get a true gauge on where he's at. In that first fight, I mean, everyone was sort of saying there was clearly something wasn't right with him. But what if that is David Haye now? What if that first 6 rounds where he looked okay but nothing special, had a weird stance going on, what if that is mostly who David Haye is now? I guess, though, from a viewing perspective, if David Haye and Tony Bellew, if they both start out cautiously, which I think is probably, you know, a reasonably safe bet, I wouldn't be expecting fireworks right from the opening bell. We could end up seeing a little bit of a stinker, a bit of a chess match for the first few rounds as they do try to work each other out, find the opening, see what's going to go their way. But in terms of the comment of David Haye being just a 4-round fighter, yeah, it's true to a point. I can see what Tony Bellew was saying. I mean, there's no denying that Haye has generally had his best work done in the first half of fights when he's fresh. But that's also true of many top fighters. You know, when you're fresh, you got your speed, power, it's all right up there. But David Haye, he's not just a one-trick pony. He's got more than just, a big right hand and athleticism, although they are the traits that he does rely on the most. I think if he has to, he can definitely go 12. And by the look of his training clips, he's coming in somewhat leaner than he did for the first fight. He was looking pretty muscle-bound for that one, but he looks a little bit leaner for this one, so that will potentially help him and his stamina. Bellew, meanwhile, I'm sure he's going to be ready to go 12. I don't know can he really knock David Haye out? I mean, I definitely don't see that early. He's looking in good shape. He looks leaner, and Haye even acknowledged that Bellew does look leaner. And I think if Bellew is to win, it's not going to be by KO early on. I don't see that. It's more likely to be anything on points. And if his game plan is, I mentioned earlier, it will be no doubt to be boxing smart and conservatively for much of the fight. Take his opportunities when they come, and I'm sure he will pounce if given the chance. But I see a decision more likely for Bellew than anything. It's actually not a bad result in terms of if you were to pick someone. Tony Bellew by decision, I'm sure that's paying pretty decent money. But in terms of Haye's chances, well, if he's managed to retain a decent portion of his former athleticism, where he was at his prime, if he hasn't come off that so much, and if he's not heading into this thing with nagging injuries, I think he does deserve to be the favourite. I would favour Haye to win. If he's half the Haye that he used to be, he should be able to beat Tony Bellew. But we just don't know what version of David Haye shows up. I can't trust his body anymore. I'm not sure he can. And I wasn't exactly impressed, as I said before, with his performance before the Achilles injury went. And when you consider before that fight, he'd had a couple of tin can warm-ups. He hasn't had a proper fight in 5 or 6 years now. What is left in the tank? I truly don't know. And this is why I find it hard to pick a winner, because, looking at it, David Haye, you go, yeah, he should win. But, all these factors. And even if he does win, if he scrapes by, Haye himself has spoken about retiring if he doesn't look good. I think some of that's just talk and bluster, because I think if the money is still there, if he's getting fights where he's getting good coin, I think he'll continue boxing. I mean, that's why he's back anyway. 5 years out, he came back for the money. He could have had a world title shot with Joseph Parker, turned it down. He could have had other opportunities, but he's chosen to go for these bigger money fights with Tony Bellew. I am on the fence with this one a little bit, because the whole trusting David Haye's body, where's he really at? Tony Bellew, meanwhile, he's more of a known quantity, where Haye is not. But I'm going to roll the dice. I'm going to go with Haye in this one, but I certainly won't be surprised in the least if Bellew ends up getting a decision win. I don't necessarily think a KO is going to come in this fight, from either actually. I think if Haye wins, it's probably more likely to be on points. But yeah, we'll just have to see. Some of this depends on what version of David Haye turns up. I hate to keep banging on about it, but that is just so true with this one, because we really don't know. What do you make of it? Drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.